We're doing probably the last of these little videos on the building of the railroad and the guys who built the railroad, the Irish immigrants who were living in the shanty towns across Hempfield Township. There were no less than 6 of those shanty towns with about 400 Irish living in Hempfield Township during the time they were building the railroad. And you never know what you're going to come up with when you go searching or researching one of these things, because things turn up that you totally unexpected. What I'm talking about is Henry David Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau, the guy who wrote the story about living on Walden Pond. Simplify, simplify, Thoreau. Anyhow, part of the story of Walden begins before Henry David Thoreau moved there. He built a little cabin out in the woods on Walden Pond. He had been teaching school at up in Massachusetts, Concord, Massachusetts, and he moved out by Walden because he got tired of living in town, and he thought people were getting corrupted by the city life and the Industrial Revolution, so he thought to go out in the woods. So he needed someplace to live, and he started to cut some trees down, and he built the beginnings of a shanty, which were pretty much just the foundations and the structure. But he needed boards, and there had been fellows around locally who had been building the railroad, the Fitchburg Railroad by Concord, Mass. And that was finished, but most of them had moved on. But there was still one shanty left, occupied by James Collins and his wife and their little baby, and they were about to move on too. And Henry David Thoreau found out it was for sale, so he stopped over to see Collins's shanty, which was for sale, because he didn't want the shanty itself, he wanted the boards. We have this interesting tale of him stopping over to see the shanty. Maybe I can read this for you. He described it as a house of small dimensions with a peaked cottage roof, the dirt being raised about 5 feet all around it as if it were a compost pile. The roof was the soundest part, a good deal warped and made brittle by the sun. The door had no sill under it, but underneath the door was a passage for the chickens to come in and out. As he was inspecting the cabin, or the shanty, Collins' wife saw him out there, and so she invited him to come in. And Thoreau enters the cabin pursued by chickens. It was dark and had a dirt floor, for the most part, dank and clammy. And as he was in there, James Collins arrived, and they made a deal for the shanty to the boards, for $4.75. And that was the boards that Henry David Thoreau used to build his little cabin on Walden Pond that most people have heard about at one time or another. Okay. Now, we are out on the railroad looking at the main line again. This is Greensburg back here. And we look at the 2 sections that the contractors Snodgrass and Haymaker were working on. Since they had 2 sections, that is 2 miles, they had about 90 guys. The majority of them lived in the shanty town, which was out around here, and the balance of them lived in a boarding house nearby. This is out by George Station Road. George Station Road comes up from Route 30 and goes across the railroad here, and we're going to use the help of Google Earth. We're out at George Station Road now, and This is the main line going into Greensburg. This house up here is still there. It is the house of the George family, and that's where the George Station Road got its name. We're looking north. That's enough of that. Stop. These things get a little bit out of hand at times. And we go back down here. And this is the railroad going out to Latrobe, going east. And down in here, that's where the original George Station was. There was a railroad station out there. Once the railroad was built, there was a lot of local traffic. The farmers wanted to ship things out and get things, and the turnpike down where Route 30 is also had connections, and they wanted to access the railroad. So there was a station built right there. And this is George Station Road looking south down to the road, down to what's now Route 30, which was then the turnpike. And this takes us into town. That's the railroad going direct that way, and then we'll see a little bit more of the other western section. Hold on. And now we go out to the western end of the main line going through Hempfield Township. There were two brothers who were contractors out here, the Wynkoop brothers, and it looks like the elder one had been in the Mexican War. He was probably a Pittsburgh person. They had two sections, these two sections out here, 2 miles. This takes it out toward what is now Jeannette, but Jeannette wasn't there yet. We're dealing with the early 1850s. And we were dealing with shanty towns, which were not wonderful places to live. This is an actual view from the 1850s of a shanty town. And you see, not exactly the kind of place you'd like to live. A couple goats fighting in the middle distance, and a pig out here rooting around. And with the help of Google Earth, we look at the territory we're going to see. This is Route 30. North is to the top. This is Green Gate Road, North Green Gate Road, and this is the railroad track. This is the railroad coming out from Greensburg. This is Routable out here, and this is going out to Grapeville and Jeannette. The fellows out here also had two sections. They started about right here and went out for 2 miles. And they had one shanty town composed of about 90 fellows. They needed 90 guys because they were doing 2 miles. They had 2 sections. And by February of 1852, they had the thing ready. It was ready to put track down. The editor of the local newspaper, the Intelligencer, came out and looked at it, and he said it was ready for track in February of 1852 already. So they didn't have as much difficult terrain to deal with. And we're going to cut this down and say so long, and see you again. Bye.